The first thing Adrian Hale felt was the cold, violent, needle-sharp, the kind that slid beneath the skin and locked itself around bone. He gasped, stumbling through knee-deep snow as the storm howled like some starving creature circling its prey. His visor was cracked, his thermal suit failing, and every breath tasted like metal and ice. The wreck of his shuttle burned faintly behind him, half buried in drifting snow. His emergency beacon blinked weakly, its light swallowed by the storm almost as soon as it appeared. If he didn't find shelter soon, he'd die. Not in an hour, not in 30 minutes. Soon. Through the whiteout, a faint orange flicker appeared, small, trembling, unnatural. Fire, or light produced by someone intelligent. Either way, it was hope. Adrian forced his frozen legs forward. The shape of a structure materialized. Metal walls half-collapsed, reinforced with stone and scavenged plating. Smoke curled upward from a vent. He couldn't afford hesitation. He slammed his gloved fist against the door. "Hello, is anyone inside?" He shouted, though his voice barely pierced the wind. No answer. He tried again, weaker this time. "Please, my suit is failing." "Nothing, fine." He'd open it himself. The manual release was stiff with ice, but after several tries, the door lurched open, releasing a wave of warm air that nearly buckled his knees. He staggered inside, shutting the door behind him, and only then realized he wasn't alone. A figure stood near the fire. A woman, tall, wrapped in dark, insulated fabric, her hair long and black, her skin an iridescent shade of violet that shimmered in the firelight. Her eyes, bright gold, locked onto him instantly, sharp and assessing. Not human, not anything he recognized from Alliance briefings, and very clearly unhappy. "What do you think you're doing here, human?" She snapped, her voice edged with cold steel. Adrian raised both hands. "I crashed. I just needed warmth. I'll leave as soon as the storm." "Not my problem. I'll freeze to death." "That's still not my problem." Her expression was unforgiving, carved from irritation and caution. She watched him like he was a threat, or worse, a burden, but she didn't throw him out. Instead, she jerked her chin toward the far corner. "Sit there, don't touch anything." Adrian collapsed near the fire, peeling off his frozen gloves as heat stabbed painfully back into his fingers. Silence stretched. She didn't trust him. Every line of her posture screamed it. The way she kept herself between him and the shelter's supplies. The way her golden eyes tracked his smallest movement. He cleared his throat. "Thank you, really." She scoffed, "Don't thank me. I still might kick you out." Despite the situation, Adrian snorted softly. Noted. He studied the shelter, crude, patched, lived in, a bed of thick furs, scavenged crates, a stack of metal tools. Whoever she was, she'd been here a long time. "You live here?" He asked carefully, her stare sharpened. "Obviously." "Why, none of your business." "Right, that was fair." He tried again later. "I'm Adrian." A beat, then reluctantly, Saris. The name suited her, sharp but beautiful, foreign but strong. He nodded. "Saris, thanks for letting me in." She clicked her tongue. "Temporary charity, don't get comfortable." He wasn't planning to, but the tremble running through his body was getting harder to hide. His suit's last reserves of heat were gone, leaving him vulnerable to the cold creeping through the air. Saris noticed. "You're shaking," she said, not with concern but with annoyance. "It's cold," Adrian muttered through chattering teeth. "Humans," she sighed, standing with sudden impatience. "You're going to die before the storm peaks." "I'll manage," he tried. "No, you won't." She crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed him by the collar with surprising strength, and hauled him toward the sleeping area. "Hey, Saris, what are you?" "Survival," she snapped. "Get in." Before he could protest, she shoved him beneath the thick furs, then climbed in beside him, her body radiating a deep, impossible warmth, like living fire contained beneath skin. Adrian froze, her forehead rested inches from his, her arm pressed against his chest. What are you doing?" "Sharing heat. You're freezing. Stop talking." "This is a bit close, isn't it?" She glared. "I swear, human, if you make this awkward." "I'm not," he hissed. "I'm just this is." "It is survival." Her warmth seeped through him instantly into his hands, his chest, his spine. His shaking eased, his breath steadied. Her voice dropped low and quiet. "Don't die in my shelter. I don't want to deal with a corpse." He managed a weak laugh. "I'll do my best." The storm howled outside, the metal walls trembling. Inside, Adrian woke to the sound of metal groaning under stress, a deep, warping sound that shuddered through the walls like the entire shelter was grinding its teeth. For a moment, he didn't know where he was, the warmth, the darkness, the weight of thick furs over him. But then memory surged. The crash, the cold, the storm, Saris. He became aware of her before he saw her. A heat unlike anything human pressed against his side, steady, controlled, pulsing with a quiet strength. Her arm was still draped over his chest, not tightly, but with enough weight that he felt the faint tension in the muscles beneath her skin. Her warmth had saved him. It was still saving him. But she was closer than he remembered. He shifted slightly, trying not to wake her, but her golden eyes opened instantly, sharp and alert. Her voice came out low, edged with a warning. "Don't move so suddenly." "Sorry," Adrian murmured. "Didn't mean to." "You flinch like prey," she muttered, pulling the furs tighter against her shoulders. "It makes my instincts react." He blinked. "React how?" She closed her eyes again. "In ways you wouldn't survive, stay still." "Right." Not comforting. The storm outside screamed against the metal, a constant roar. Snow blew in horizontal sheets across the small window slits, making the world look like a shifting wall of white. "You weren't kidding," Adrian said quietly. "The storm really isn't letting up." Saris didn't look at him. "It won't for days." "Days," he echoed. "You entered a death world, human. It does not care about your schedule." He couldn't help a small, tired laugh. "Yeah, I got that impression." The shelter creaked again, louder this time. Saris tensed immediately, lifting her head like a predator catching the scent of danger. Adrian frowned. "That doesn't sound good." "It's the wind," she said, though her voice wasn't as confident as her words. "Maybe." "Maybe." Saris slid out from under the furs, her movements fluid and controlled despite the limited space. Adrian almost missed her warmth the moment she left. Cold air rushed in like a hungry thing. She grabbed a metal rod from the wall and tapped the ceiling in 3 separate spots. The echo rang unevenly. She muttered something in her own language, sharp syllables, irritated. "What is it?" he asked. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "The outer plate is loosening. If it tears off, the wind will rip half the roof open." "That sounds bad." "It is," she said simply, "and fixing it in this storm is suicide." She set the metal rod aside and crouched by the fire, feeding it new fuel. The glow lit her features, sharp cheekbones, dark lashes, hair falling in messy waves over her shoulders. She wasn't just beautiful, she had the kind of beauty that looked dangerous to behold directly, like staring into a flame too long. Adrian sat upright, pulling the furs around him. "So what do we do?" "We wait," Sarah said, "and hope the storm weakens before the structure does." Adrian hesitated, then asked, "Is this why you've stayed here so long, because you can't leave during the storms?" She froze, her shoulders tightened just slightly. Her golden eyes narrowed at the fire. "You ask too many questions," she muttered. "Maybe," he said softly, "but you didn't say no." Saris finally looked at him, really looked at him. There was something behind her gaze he couldn't read. Not anger, not fear, not trust, something in between. After a moment she spoke. "This shelter was here long before I arrived. Whoever built it is gone. And you don't know who they were." A small shake of her head. "Doesn't matter. Their leftovers keep me alive. That's enough." "But you've been here a long time," he said. "You said that." Saris picked up a piece of metal scrap and turned it in her hands, as if studying imaginary imperfections. "Time is different when you're banished." Adrian's breath caught. There it was, the wound behind her anger. She didn't elaborate, but he didn't need her to. He could hear it in her tone. The exhaustion of someone who had lived too long with silence as her only companion. He spoke gently. "What did your people—" "Stop," she cut in, sharper than the wind outside. "I am not telling you that." He raised his hands. "Okay." Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't hostile. It was fragile. Then a sound cut through it. A deep thud, not the storm, something else. Both of them froze. The metal wall vibrated again, harder. A low scraping noise followed, like something dragging claws across the outer plating. Adrian's heart kicked hard. "Saris, that's not weather." "No," she whispered. Another impact hit the shelter, this one strong enough to rattle the fire pit. Saris stood slowly, her posture shifting, her muscles coiling with predatory focus. "Do not move, do not speak." He swallowed hard. "Is it one of the creatures from last night?" "Worse," she murmured. The scraping grew louder, closer. Adrian could feel his pulse in his throat. "What do they want?" Saris's eyes glowed faintly, catching the firelight. "Warmth, life, anything that screams alive." Adrian's voice was barely a whisper. "They can smell us." "They can sense us," she corrected. "Everything warm-blooded." The creature thudded against the wall again, harder this time. The sound reverberated through the metal, through Adrian's bones. Saris stepped closer to him, not touching, but close enough that he felt her warmth again. "Stay behind me," she murmured. Another crash. The wall buckled inward with a shriek of tortured metal. Snow burst through the growing gap, carried by a gale that cut straight through the shelter's warmth. Adrian flinched backward. Saris didn't move, she stepped forward. Her posture shifted into something primal, shoulders low, claws extended, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. She wasn't bracing for impact. She was preparing to strike first. The creature outside scraped again. A guttural, rattling growl vibrated through the metal. Adrian felt it in his teeth. Saris turned her head slightly, speaking without looking away from the wall. "When I open the door." "The door," Adrian hissed. "You're going outside." She cut him off sharply. "If it breaks through here, you'll die in seconds. I can fight it in the open. You cannot." Another impact slammed into the wall, harder than the last. A beam bent inward. Snow poured in. Adrian's breath stuttered. "Saris, there could be more of them out there." "There are," she said flatly. "That doesn't make this a better idea. It makes it the only one." She grabbed a metal hook from the wall, something like a spearhead welded to a rod. It wasn't elegant, but in her grip it looked deadly. The creature snarled again, and the shelter shook violently. Saris's voice lowered into a tone that felt ancient. "When I go out, you bar the door behind me." "I'm not letting you go out alone." She shot him a glare over her shoulder, golden eyes blazing. "You are in no condition to fight. You can barely stand." He hated how true that was. His legs trembled from cold and adrenaline. His hands were shaking, but leaving her alone felt wrong. "Saris, you want to help me?" she snapped. "Then live." Before he could argue, she grabbed the manual release lever. "Saris, wait." She yanked it down. The door slammed upward. A hurricane of white light and screaming wind blasted into the shelter, nearly throwing Adrian off his feet. Saris lunged into the storm with a feral snarl, disappearing instantly into the blizzard's swirling veil. Adrian staggered forward, grabbed the door, and shoved with all his weight. The wind fought him viciously. He pushed harder, teeth clenched, until the door finally clanged shut. The silence inside felt unnatural after the hurricane outside. He pressed his forehead to the metal, breath hitching. "Don't die out there," he murmured. A roar answered him, not human, not anything natural. A deep, furious sound that shook the snow beneath the shelter. Adrian backed up instinctively. He couldn't see her, he couldn't help her, he hated it. Minutes stretched, or maybe seconds. The storm distorted time into something elastic and cruel. Then another sound, a heavy thud, then two, something scraped across the roof. Adrian's heart hammered painfully. Saris. A body slammed into the wall hard enough that the tools on the shelves rattled. Adrian jumped back. Was it her? Was it the creature? Was she winning or dying? Every instinct screamed at him to stay inside. To obey, to survive. But another instinct, quieter, stubborn, pushed in the opposite direction. He couldn't just sit here. He grabbed the only tool he saw within reach, a heavy wrench, cold and crudely repaired. It wasn't a weapon, but it was something. Another roar tore through the storm. This one was different, shorter, painful, desperate, not the creature, Saris. Adrian's blood ran cold. He ran to the door, his hands hesitated on the release. She told him not to leave. She ordered him to stay. But he couldn't listen, not if she was dying. He pulled the lever. The door blasted open again, snow slamming into him like a wall. He staggered forward into the storm, wrapping his arm over his face to shield his eyes. The world was a violent blur of white and shadow. Snow whipped sideways. Ice bit into his skin. He could barely see 3 meters ahead. Saris. He shouted into the void. A dark shape flickered somewhere in the blinding white. He moved toward it, fighting every step. Another shape slammed into the first. 2 figures, one large, massive, the creature, the other. Saris. She was on one knee, one arm bloody, her breathing harsh and ragged. She lifted her head as Adrian approached, her expression twisting with fury. "What are you doing out here?" she shouted over the storm. "I'm not letting you die." "You idiot." The creature lunged at her again. Adrian reacted on instinct. He swung the wrench. It connected with a sickening crack against one of the creature's jaws. The beast jerked sideways with a roar of pain, but barely. It turned its enormous head toward Adrian, eyes glowing like embers in the storm. Adrian felt the wrongness instantly. He had made himself prey. The creature lunged. Time seemed to slow. Saris moved before Adrian could blink. She slammed into him, knocking him backward into the snow just as the creature's claws tore through the space where he had been standing. She rolled with him, using her body to shield him, her claws digging into the ice as she snarled at the beast. The creature roared and lunged again. Saris surged to her feet, grabbed Adrian by the collar and literally threw him back toward the shelter. He hit the snow hard, a burst of pain shooting through his ribs. "Inside!" she screamed. "I'm not leaving you." Geo. The creature attacked again. Saris met it with a roar of her own, her claws glowing faintly in the storm's dim light. Adrian scrambled backward toward the shelter, torn between survival and the instinct to run to her again. He reached the door, grabbed the frame, and looked back. Saris moved like a force of nature. The storm was a living thing, screaming, clawing, tearing sound and sight into shreds. Snow lashed Adrian's face, blinding him, each breath burning his lungs with ice. He could barely make out shapes, only motion. Dark, violent. Saris and the creature were little more than shadows slamming into each other in the white chaos. He heard her snarl, low and feral, followed by the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. The beast roared, the sound so deep it vibrated through his chest. For one wild second, both shapes disappeared into the blur. "Saris!" he shouted, though the wind snatched the name and tore it apart. He couldn't see, he couldn't think. All he knew was that if he did nothing, she would die, and then he would die alone in a world made of teeth and cold. Adrian forced himself to stop moving and listen. The storm's howl was everywhere, but underneath it, there. Heavy, deliberate footfalls circling, one set, the creature, and somewhere closer, slower, unsteady Saris. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing his mind to focus. The beast was attracted to heat, movement, noise. It wasn't just a predator. It was a sensor. He opened his eyes again, blinking snow from his lashes. The shelter loomed behind him, its side partially buried in drifts, the metal plates shuddering under the wind. One upper panel near the roof was hanging loose from where the creature had struck earlier, listing outward like a half-open flap. An idea formed, a bad one, a desperate one. He looked down at the wrench still clutched in his hand. "Fine," he muttered. "Let's see how much physics you understand." He stumbled toward the wall, teeth chattering, fingers so numb he could barely feel the metal. He reached the loose panel, grabbed the edge, and dragged it outward as far as he could. Wind immediately tried to tear it out of his grip. He braced his shoulder against it, wrench in the other hand, and slammed the metal as hard as he could. The sound was enormous, like a gong being struck in the middle of a hurricane. The vibration ran up his arms and into his bones. The creature's roar cut off. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then heavy footfalls pivoted, coming closer. "Yeah," Adrian whispered. "Come on, over here." He slammed the panel again. The sound ripped through the storm, a sharp metallic crack that stabbed straight into the howling white. The approaching steps grew faster. Adrian's courage tried to evacuate his body. He held his ground anyway. A massive shadow surged into view through the blizzard. Only a few meters away now, towering, armored in jagged plates of pale bone and dark fur. Its eyes burned like coals, locked onto the vibrating metal and the heat shivering behind it. Okay, Adrian breathed. This was incredibly stupid. The creature reared up, claws tearing at the wall, jaws opening in a roar that showed rows of curved, serrated teeth. It lunged straight for him. Adrian ducked and threw himself sideways at the last second, releasing the panel. The wind caught the loose metal and flung it like a shield straight into the creature's face. The impact rang like thunder. The beast bellowed, staggering, stunned for a crucial second. Something dark and fast exploded out of the white from the side. Saris. She leapt onto the creature's back with a snarl, claws glowing faintly with violet heat as she drove them into the gaps in its natural armor. The smell of burning flesh cut through the cold. The creature thrashed, trying to dislodge her. She held on, muscles straining, jaw clenched. Adrian could see blood on her arm, dark against the snow. "Adrian," she shouted, not looking at him. Now, he didn't ask what she meant. There was no time. He forced his shaking body forward, grabbed the fallen panel with both hands, and hefted it like an oversized blade. The creature reared back, exposing the softer underside of its neck as it screamed at the sky. Adrian ran. He swung. The panel's edge slammed into the beast's throat with all the momentum he had. It wasn't clean. It wasn't precise. But it was enough. The creature choked, its roar snapping into a gurgle as it collapsed sideways, snow exploding around them. Saris leapt clear at the last second, landing in a low crouch. For a moment, everything was silent except the storm. Adrian fell to his knees, gasping, every breath knives. The creature twitched once, then didn't move again. He stared at it, chest heaving, mind refusing to fully process that it was actually dead. Saris stood slowly, her shoulders rising and falling with measured breaths. She turned toward him, snow clinging to her hair, blood streaked across her violet skin. Golden eyes burned at him through the storm. You, she said, voice low and thin with exertion, are absolutely out of your mind. Adrian laughed, or something like it. It came out halfway between a cough and a hysterical breath. You're welcome. She stared at him for a heartbeat that felt much longer than it was. Then unexpectedly she huffed. Not quite a scoff, not quite a laugh, something begrudgingly approving. Get inside, she said, before you fall apart. He didn't argue. She half-guided, half-shoved him back toward the shelter. The door fought them, the wind trying to wrench it from their hands, but they forced it shut together, muscles trembling. Inside, the relative quiet felt unreal. The fire was burning low, embers glowing faintly. Adrian collapsed next to it, the wrench clattering from his fingers. Every part of him shook, not from cold now, but from adrenaline. Sarah stood over him for a moment, breathing hard. You disobeyed me, she said. You were losing, he countered, her jaw tightened. I had it under control. You were bleeding. She glared down at him, lips parting like she was about to deliver a scathing retort. Instead, she exhaled slowly and dropped into a crouch in front of him. Give me your hands, she said. He blinked. What? She rolled her eyes. Your hands, human, you can't even feel them anymore. He hadn't realized until she said it how numb his fingers were. They felt like someone else's hands attached to his arms. He held them out awkwardly. Saris took them in hers. Her palms were hot. Not just warm, not human warm, but deep, steady heat that sank straight into his skin. She wrapped her fingers around his own, closing firmly, letting her warmth pour into him. He shuddered. Your species, she muttered, focused, is remarkably fragile. And yours, he managed, is remarkably insulting. Stay still. He did. The sensation crawled back into his fingers slowly. Pins and needles at first, then aching, then heat. He watched her face as she worked, the subtle tension there, the fine lines of concentration, the way her lashes cast shadows on her cheeks in the firelight. You could have died, she said quietly without looking up. So could you. I am designed for this. She paused. You are not. You keep saying that, Adrian said, but I'm still here. Her eyes flicked up to his, sharp and golden. For now. They held each other's gaze. The storm shrieked outside, but in here in the glow of the failing fire, there was a different kind of intensity pressing in around them. Adrian swallowed, his voice softening. If I hadn't distracted it, it would have torn you apart. A muscle jumped in her jaw. It misjudged you, she said. Most things do. He smiled faintly. Is that your way of saying thank you? No, a beat, maybe. He felt something loosen in his chest at that. She released his hand slowly, testing his grip with a brief squeeze. Better. Yeah, he said, still freezing, but better. She clicked her tongue. You're going to drain me if you keep forcing me to warm you back from the edge of death. Want me to stop doing stupid, heroic things? Yes, not promising anything. She gave him a long, exasperated look that was only half real annoyance. Without warning, she tugged the furs down again and jerked her head toward them. Get in. His brain glitched. Wait again. You went outside, she said flatly. You burned what little heat you had left. Either you get back under the furs with me or I watch you slowly die over the next 6 hours, and I've had enough entertainment for one day. He hesitated. You sure you're okay with? Adrian, she said, and there was something different about the way she said his name this time. Steady, deliberate, not contemptuous at all. Stop arguing with survival. He shut up. They slipped under the furs, closer this time because there wasn't much space left that wasn't already occupied by warmth. Her arm slid around his back almost automatically, anchoring him, pulling him against the furnace of her body. He could feel the rise and fall of her breathing, the solid weight of her presence, the steady thrum of heat beneath her skin. He exhaled slowly, tension finally starting to uncoil from his muscles. You really were going to fight that thing alone? He murmured. Of course. Even if it killed you. If it killed me, she said. I'd make sure it remembered me for the rest of its brief, miserable existence. He smiled against the furs. You're terrifying, you know that. Good. A pause. Adrian drifted awake to warmth, dense, enveloping, impossible warmth, wrapped around him like a living cocoon. For a moment he didn't know where he was. The storm outside had dropped to a dull, distant roar, more a throaty growl than the violent screaming of before. Then he felt her. Saris's arm draped over his ribs, her legs tangled loosely with his, her breath soft against the back of his neck. She radiated heat like a second sun, steady and deep. He could feel the faint rise and fall of her chest against his spine. Careful, deliberate. Alive, he didn't move, he barely breathed. If he had to guess, she hadn't intended to fall asleep this close. She wasn't the type to let her guard down easily. But after the fight, the blood loss, the exhaustion. He shifted slightly, not enough to pull away, just enough to see her face. Her eyes were closed, lashes resting against violet skin, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. Not angry, not tense, not watching him like a threat. She looked young. Not in age, something else, something rare, something vulnerable. He never would have said it aloud, but he found himself unable to look away. Then, without warning, her golden eyes opened. Adrian froze. She didn't flinch, didn't pull back. She simply blinked once, her gaze heavy-lidded with sleep and heat, still half drifting between instinct and awareness. "You're staring," she murmured, her voice rough and soft at once. "Sorry," he whispered. "Wasn't trying to." "You were," she said, but not accusingly, just stating a fact. He swallowed. "You were asleep." "And you were not," she observed. "That's usually how staring works." Her lips twitched just slightly, almost a smile. "Almost humans," she muttered, shifting her weight as if preparing to pull away. Without thinking, Adrian reached out, not grabbing her, not stopping her, just a light touch to her forearm. "Wait." She blinked again, slower this time. "What?" "You don't have to move." A breath passed, hers or his, he couldn't tell. "This is for warmth," she reminded him, but the edge was missing. Nothing more. "I know," he said quietly, "but you don't have to move just because you woke up." Her gaze flickered across his face, his eyes, his mouth back to his eyes, measuring something, searching for something, uncertain what she would find. Then, without a word, she relaxed back into place. Her forehead rested lightly between his shoulder blades. Her breath warmed the fabric of his suit. Her arms settled around him again, less stiff this time, less guarded. It took Adrian a moment to steady the thrum in his chest. Sarah spoke first. "You're still injured," she murmured. "Your ribs are strained." "You felt that. You twist in your sleep," she said simply. "I adjusted your position twice." He blinked. "You adjusted me." "You humans," she muttered again, "fall apart like wet string." Adrian laughed softly despite the ache. "And yet you keep fixing me." A pause. "You keep needing fixing." Another pause, softer. "And I keep doing it." The way she said it, confused, reluctant, like the words were slipping out before she could pull them back, made Adrian swallow hard. He didn't want to break the moment, but something had been gnawing at him ever since the creature attacked. "Saris," he said, "what exactly are those things?" Her arm tightened around him just slightly. "Night stalkers, apex predators of this region. Why do they keep coming here, to your shelter?" Another pause, longer. He felt her breath falter. "They weren't always this bold," she admitted quietly. "But for the last 30 cycles, they follow my heat, my scent, my energy." She hesitated as if the next words were a confession. "I draw them." Adrian turned his head slightly, trying to see her expression. "Why?" Her jaw tightened. "Because I'm not like the rest of my kind." That alone told him volumes, but she kept going. "My people regulate everything, emotion. Energy, heat, we are taught to make ourselves as neutral as possible, efficient, silent." Her voice grew sharper, bitter, predictable. "You're not predictable," he said softly. "No," she said, "I'm not." "So they exiled you?" "Yes." He turned fully, facing her, their noses a breath apart beneath the furs. Her golden eyes searched his, bright and fierce and tired all at once. "Saris," he said gently, "being strong doesn't make you dangerous." "It did to them," she whispered, "and it does to you." He shook his head. "If I thought you were dangerous to me, I wouldn't be here." A faint muscle jumped in her throat. "You should fear me," she said, but it came out weak, unconvincing. "Do you want me to?" he asked. Her breath hitched. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then something shifted in her expression, something like frustration, something like surrender, something like the moment just before a wild creature moves toward a hand instead of away from it. "No," she said finally, barely audible. Adrian felt warmth bloom in his chest that had nothing to do with her body heat. The storm outside groaned, wind rattling the metal walls like the world wanted to break in and tear this fragile moment apart. Saris blinked slowly, her lashes brushing his skin. "I don't understand you," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "You're not supposed to yet." She exhaled through her nose, a sound halfway between annoyance and acceptance, and rested her forehead gently against his. His breath, the storm weakened by morning, not by much, but enough that the world outside the shelter was no longer a white wall. Shapes existed again, shadows, the hint of a horizon. Adrian stood near the door, wrapped in one of the furs Saris had thrown at him the moment he'd tried to step outside unprotected. "You are not built for this," she'd muttered. "You'll last 10 seconds." He ignored the part of him that suspected she was right. He looked back at her now as she tightened the fastenings on her outer coat. She moved slower than usual. Her injuries from the previous day had not vanished. "You shouldn't be out here at all," he said. "You need to rest." Saris glanced at him, golden eyes narrowed. "Resting is how you die on this world. And going out injured is how you die even faster." "Then stay close," she snapped, tugging the last clasp into place. He did, closer than she probably expected. Their shoulders brushed. She froze for half a heartbeat, then continued checking her gear. Something still weighed on her. He could see it in the tension along her jaw, the way she kept looking toward the distant ridges beyond the storm. "Saris," he said softly, "what is it?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked past him and pushed open the shelter door. Cold air poured in sharp and biting. The world was still bleak. Blue-white snow, low gray sky, jagged black rock, but not completely blind anymore. She stepped out and motioned for him to follow. He did. They walked side by side, the crunch of snow beneath them the only sound for long minutes. Eventually, Saris stopped on a rise overlooking a deep valley. Adrian followed her gaze. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. Then he did, metal twisted, ancient, half buried in snow, an enormous circular structure sunken into the ground like the ribcage of a long-dead titan. "What is that?" Adrian whispered. Saris didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was quiet. "Raw, my exile." He turned to her. She wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on the ruins, something unreadable in her expression. "My people call this place a correction world," she said. "For those who defy hierarchy, for those who refuse to become obedient." Adrian's stomach tightened. "They sent you here alone." "No," she said, "I wasn't alone." He waited. "They sent others with me," she continued. "Stronger than most, dangerous like me, or so they believed." "What happened to them?" he asked quietly. Saris's breath made a cloud in the frigid air. "They died," she said, her voice flat. "One by one, storms, creatures, the cold. This world tests everything you are, breaks what it can, devours what it can't." "And you survived," Adrian murmured, her jaw tightened. "I didn't survive, I endured." There was something in the way she said it, like survival was not victory but a sentence. "I'm getting you off this world," he said. Saris didn't look at him. "No, you came here by accident, you're leaving by chance, I stay." "Like hell you do." She turned sharply at that, golden eyes bright with something between anger and disbelief. "You don't understand. There is nowhere for me. If I return home, they'll kill me. If I join humans, you'll dissect me or fear me or weaponize me. I don't belong anywhere." "You belong with someone," Adrian said, stepping closer. "That's how belonging works. One person, one choice, one place you're not alone." She stared at him, numb or stunned. He couldn't tell which. Before she could respond, the ground vibrated. A dull tremor rolled across the valley, then another. Adrian's heart clenched. Not again. Saris's expression shifted instantly, from vulnerable to alert, lethal. "Night stalkers don't hunt during daylight unless." A roar tore through the frozen air. Bigger, deeper, too close. The hair on Adrian's arms stood on end. "Saris," he whispered. "I know," she said, dropping into a defensive stance. Something massive moved between the ruins below. The snow shifted like something beneath the surface was swimming up through it. "Run," Adrian suggested. "Too late," Saris muttered. The creature erupted from the snow with a violent spray of ice. Twice the size of the previous ones, its armor thicker, its breath steaming like a furnace. Its eyes burned brighter, hotter. It wasn't just hunting. It was tracking, Saris inhaled sharply. "It's following my energy." "Then we draw it away from the shelter," Adrian said. "You're not fast enough," she snapped. "Then you make me fast enough." She stared at him. "Adrian." "No negotiation," he said. "Not this time." He grabbed her wrist warm, strong, alive, and held it tightly. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm not leaving you." For the first time since he'd met her, Saris didn't argue. She looked at him, really looked, and something broke open in her expression, something small and fierce and frightened and hopeful all at once. "Then stay beside me," she whispered. The creature roared. Saris pulled Adrian forward. They ran. But this time she didn't run ahead. She ran with him. The world blurred around them, wind, snow, the crash of massive clawed limbs behind them. Saris moved like lightning, guiding him, pulling him, shielding him. Adrian followed, adrenaline burning through every part of him. The creature lunged. Saris yanked Adrian behind a jagged outcrop as the beast slammed into it, rock exploding outward. She shoved him behind her, claws glowing with that strange, violent heat. "This ends now," she said. The creature lunged again. Saris met it head-on. Her claws cut through the beast's armor with a crackling hiss. The creature struck back, sending her skidding across the snow. Adrian rushed toward her, but she was already up, darting aside, striking again. It wasn't enough. It was too big, too armored, too fast. Adrian's eyes scanned frantically and landed on a shattered support beam jutting from the ruins, half loosened by the tremor. A trap, a plan. "Saris," he shouted. "Get it toward the ridge." She didn't ask why, didn't hesitate. She pivoted sharply, taunting the creature, darting backward until it followed her up the incline. Adrian sprinted toward the beam, muscles screaming, breath burning. He reached it, braced his shoulders, and shoved with everything he had. It didn't budge. The creature thundered after Saris, gaining ground. "Adrian," she shouted. He snarled and shoved harder. The beam cracked. The snow beneath it gave way. Gravity did the rest. The beam toppled forward, straight toward the creature. It tried to leap left, too slow. The beam crashed into its skull with a deafening crack. The beast staggered, roared a strangled, broken sound. Then fell, silence slammed into the valley. Adrian collapsed to his knees, breathless. Saris ran to him, sliding into the snow in front of him, gripping his shoulders. "You're an idiot," she breathed. "You keep saying that," he gasped, "but here we are." Her hand lifted.
Me encanta la onda cyberpunk.
A mí casi no me gusta.
Alemanas,
hay mucho goyos.
No las vi a todos.
¿Cómo? Hace tanto ruido, güey, que no se escuchan las letras mucho.
We did that mission too. ¡Hola verga, vivo la verga, perro! ¡Híjole a la verga, con tu puta madre, la verga! ¡La verga, verga!
Dile a algún goyo que me mande saludos, pera, y ya no me compras los taquitos.
A un goyo que te mande saludos.
Háblale a la de Spy Family.
¿Cuál, güey? Yo no veo nada de Spy Family, güey. Pinche loco.
Sí.